It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It's Feedback Friday, and there's a lot of feedback this week, a lot of very high quality comments. I'm gonna bounce around a bit. I want to start with Wednesday's video about recovering from abusive relationships because I actually think it's a good primer for the other two videos of this week, which, as usual, got much more traffic, but again, quality over quantity on Wellness Wednesday. People find the advice very useful. And it seems like the ongoing thing is for systemized thinkers like me. The comments are of the form of I've always heard you have to do this, you have to do that, but you give me concrete examples that let me understand, like the piece by piece. I'm underpants gnoming mental health, right? Because so much self-help, mental health therapy advice is, step 1, collect underpants. Step 3, profit. What's step 2? I'm trying to provide the segmented step 2. And one person asked me for advice for friends, partners, loved ones of people recovering from abusive relationships. And a lot of people responded to the fact that I didn't lump it into like romantic relationships. A lot of people responded to the job stuff, which I found really interesting. And I mean, I've been in multiple abusive work environments, so this doesn't surprise me. If you like this kind of stuff, before I get into the feedback, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. There's a link in the description box. It really helps. The biggest thing I can say about supporting someone through something like this is to watch the unsolicited advice. Don't go, you know what you should do, because you don't know what they should do. You're not in the specific situation. You can ask, what would help you? Would you like to know my take on it? Would you, would it help if you heard some perspective? Feel free to say no. I find it's very important to include that feel free to say no, so people know it's not a loaded question. You're not going to get offended. The words asking, not telling are an ongoing thing when I'm not doing these videos, where all I'm doing is telling. We have the feedback process here, but unsolicited advice is a big thing. And it's something you have to unlearn, because people who are helpers, people who are fixers, that's their love language, for the lack of a better term. I hate that hoity-toity terminology, but a lot of people, that's what they would want. They would want practical advice, and so they give it thinking everybody's like them. I guess one of the benefits of being a very rare personality type, especially for women, is I am acutely aware that most people do not approach problems the way I do. So I don't assume that. I take a bit of time to try to figure out what somebody else is looking for. So that's one. Ask a lot of questions. And if you see somebody starting to get kind of worked up, ease up on the questions, go back on that. Validating sounds really hard. In your shoes, I'd be really frustrated, or that sounds very, upsetting, that sort of thing. Step back on that, wait to see the person kind of get grounded again. And then you can ask another question of what will help? What do you need? Those questions are very helpful for allowing the abused person to feel like they have a sense of control over their circumstances again. And they probably will need help with that. Recovering from abuse is a grieving process, grieving not just the loss of what the relationship was in the early days, but also grieving the loss of that part of themselves that got damaged or destroyed by the abuser. They need to rebuild a new piece of themselves on top of that, It'll never quite be the same again. That's not a bad thing. You can build back new and improved, but they do need that support. Just having supportive people around them that they can talk to or not talk to is really super important. On that subject, one commenter who it's interesting. It's this one commenter recovering from like a really shitty abusive workplace. I've been watching it play out in the comments. And this commenter said, and I'm not using names here because this is like a sensitive thing. So, and also I need to collapse comments so there's enough time to get it all in one video because there's so much this week. But this person said, I feel like I need to get back on the horse and realize not everyone is an asshat, but this might work for some people, but it sounds like this particular commenter is stuck, like the but, right? Trauma, this, that, the next thing. I found, and this is counterintuitive, because part of what left me feeling so drained is I am a person who just gives 200%. I know that's not possible. This is why I get so worn down. I give 200% to everything I do. I push myself really hard. And I realized that that's often not the most productive thing to do because certain things you can't just push through. You become increasingly unproductive. The best advice a friend gave me, and it was like just off the cuff, like, welcome to the club, chum, about a really, really bad game dev job experience I had, like crunch, abusive workplace, the whole thing. He just said to me, don't make any decisions on another project for 2 weeks. I'm like, oh man, 2 weeks is an eternity. But he was right. Like, it was this process of just being indescribably exhausted for about 10 days. And then really emotional, like, you know when your leg falls asleep and it comes back and it like hurts and it's all tingly? It's like, you don't know where to put it. Emotionally, it felt like that too. Like, it was just all of a sudden I was allowed to feel things again that I hadn't been allowed to feel for months and months and months because I was constantly in a state of don't respond, just suck it up, don't respond, don't take the bait. And it's amazing how packed down you get. So, for those who feel like they need to get back on the horse and feel like it's not happening, ease off on yourself. If it's not happening yet, the hardest part of riding a horse for me is getting on the horse. Once you're on, you kind of, okay, horsey go. Then it's sort of a partnership. But getting up, man, like that saddle slides around and it's really freaking tall. That's the hardest part. Excuse the metaphor, it kind of works. I'm just going back to the terrifying experience I had learning how to herd cattle. It happened on camera. Such is my life. Cows are freaking scary. Don't get distracted, Leanna. Okay. The point is, baby steps, right? Don't focus on getting back on the horse. Focus on getting your foot in the saddle. So foot in the stirrup, if that makes any sense. Like, instead of the big up, like, just get your foot up into that thing. And then when your foot's up, get it on the horn of the saddle. Or if it's English, there is none. But you know what I mean? We're doing Western here. But pieces, systemize it. There's a process. Don't try to do it all at once, right? There is a process. And if you try to just, what you're trying to do emotionally is you're trying to just take a running jump at the horse. You leap into the air and land in the saddle and not crush your testicles, right? The proverbial testicles. Everyone has testicles for the purpose of this. One step at a time. I find this works a lot better than trying to jump. And there is no crushing of vital organs involved if you do it slow and steady and one step at a time. This is a really good segue because I was just like a butthead there trying to kind of lighten things up. And because sometimes I find people laugh, they're like, oh, okay, it's not so great. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do that. You're right. I have been crushing my brain testicles. You can quote me on that. One guy said in the comments, like, I'm a man. I like being strong and dumb because that's my choice. And I chuckled at that. I was like, you know what? That's good. Some people are like that. Some people are just that proverbial typical guy. And that's fine. Like, nobody should have to change the core of who they are. They should just be aware. Like I said, not everybody responds to things in the same way. And I don't want a paradigm where it seems like, because if we go from this is this box of what man is and what woman is, and then you get like everybody who doesn't fit neatly into those two boxes, but that's the whole point. Like, we have to recognize that these gendered connections to how people behave and how they view the world and things like that, they're heuristics, they're shorthands, and on the individual level they can be so wrong. And I find it great that somebody said, I'm big and dumb because I want to be. It's like, that's great. And I think people should be accepted if that's who they truly are. Sweet. Some people are, tank class characters. They're that fighter class in D&D, but some people are rogues and some people are wizards and some people are priests, and you need all of them to form a party. I mean, God, some of the best salespeople I've known are really dumb lugs because they're personable. They like people. They like to chat, and they get rejected. They don't get upset. They just do it again and do it again, do it again. Take the shot, take the shot, take the shot. And they're great salespeople. So I just want to make it clear that I spend a lot of time talking about people who are not gender typical. If you're gender typical, awesome. Complete, like, grinding the gears segue here to YouTube has been eating comments. I don't know why. Best I can tell is certain keywords just eat the comment. They don't end up in the held for review tab. They're just gone. I don't know what those keywords are. I am as frustrated by this as you are. Moving on, somebody asked me about how I feel about crowdfunded porn games. We're moving into the sex negativity video. Subverse. I don't know very much about Subverse. I'm aware of it. I'm aware it really did really well in crowdfunding. How do you feel about crowdfunded porn games? Oh my goodness, I have thoughts. I think that crowdfunding is a good source of those things because it's a community thing. People have a better sense of what they're getting into when the game comes out because it's community backed. I know there is a lot of grift in that space. A lot of people say, I'm gonna do this game, and they get funding for it, and then they just disappear, never to be seen again. Then the game never comes out. I don't want to ignore that. I do think that, a properly produced, we'll say, adult game, it's its own form of art. It's its own form of interactivity. I think that anything that's done in terms of understanding yourself better, and sexuality is a big part of understanding yourself better. I think anything that happens among consenting adults, and this is going to be the theme, consenting adults, anything that's safe, sane, and consensual in that space and teaches you about what you like, what you don't like, what you're into, what you're not into, that's really good. And so, I mean, I think all adult games, like porn games, they have their place. And I wish we could have a better discussion about what that place is instead of whether or not there is a place. Of course there's a place. I mean, there's so many adult gamers right now. And I really think those sorts of things, those sorts of preferences in terms of preferences, tastes, as opposed to orientation, are really important to know about yourself. I think they teach you a lot about who you are on a deeper level, because those things are kind of linked to core values in some ways, not to overthink it. But yeah, I mean, it was a vague question, so kind of vague answer. But this moves into the whole I like it, I don't like it. This moves into another set of comments that I got about at least this particular person who identified as male said that admitting that some sort of touch or some sort of advance was unwanted, was uncomfortable, and got dismissed. Oh, you really liked it, oh, come on, the whole thing, that is something that happened to this person and other men they knew. And this is unfortunately far from the first time I'm hearing this. It's something we got to talk about more. I think that a lot of messages that are sent to guys about sexuality are really not, they're counterproductive. I want to be careful with this because so many people said in the comments, I don't like the term toxic. They're counterproductive because those sorts of things are supposed to be about feeling good. And so much of this stuff makes everybody involved feel bad, right? It's not supposed to work that way. And if somebody is dismissing when you say you don't like something, that's got everything to do with them. You did the right thing, speaking up and saying that you didn't like that. I mean, this idea that's connected to a whole bunch of really unhealthy assumptions about men and what's normal and what's natural for men. And I don't have the time to get into all of that here. I'm sure it'll come up eventually. But all I can say to the commenters, you did the right thing. Speaking up. Good for you. We need more of that. They did the wrong thing, dismissing you. I don't know if that makes you feel any better. But those sorts of things should never be dismissed. There can be a lot of reasons why a lot of valid reasons why something's uncomfortable for somebody individually. And I really think that the best system is that, on a macro level, we let a bunch of things, like the maximum amount of things are allowable, precisely because on the micro level, we have the relationships with each other. We just please don't do that. Like, I don't like that. It's a personal thing. Don't like it. And people shouldn't have to justify that. People shouldn't have to explain that. It's just, I'm not into that. I really don't like it. Without shame. That's like ideal for me. And, no better example of that, I think, in recent history. The Cardi B thing happened, like, right when I was making that video. I hadn't seen it yet. Wow, is this an example? I mean, I say sex negativity will not win, and then Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion did that as if, like, proving how far the rest of entertainment is from video games. Now, some people may claim that they went too far, but personally, I think that the Grammy musical award shows are a different beast than acting award shows, right? Because at the Oscars or the Golden Globes, people don't get up and perform scenes from their plays, right? They're people there. But at the Grammys, at the American Music Awards, people are performing their songs. And Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion's big hit happened to be WAP. So they performed WAP. And I mean, Trevor Noah did a big not safe for work. You may want to change the channel for a bit. So nobody went in watching live unprepared. But people still freaked. And I found that very funny because there is an example of, that was what was going on in music, and then there's Billie Eilish and I forget who she was singing with. And that, BTS was I am fond of BTS. I admit, a 7-person group is a lot to coordinate. And, just the caliber of their performances in that space always impress me. But very different things, right? And some people can say, well, my kid wanted to see BTS and I got this instead. It's like they told you to temporarily change the channel, man. Like BTS was long into the performance, And I still think we're a little too, we expect the world to be too nerfed for kids. The challenge is when we get into, rock and hip hop and kind of the edgier music forms, there is going to be some of that, and that should be allowable. And if you have young children, that's why we have the internet, and that's why you can watch the performances, or at least in the US you can. Up here, everything's geofenced. It's really frustrating. I had to get somebody to record the performance on their phone and send it to me for me to see the whole thing. I really appreciate that. If it's awarding the best in music, it's awarding the best in music, not just kid-friendly music. And if there's warnings, if there's content warnings, they were warned, right? That's my thoughts. Parents had ample time. We live in an age where, they're showing graphic violence on the news. Not always with content warnings. I mean, God, I was really disturbed after 1/6. The stuff they showed on the air. I'm like, man, warn a guy, because I was disturbed. You just can't see suffering on a loop like that and not be affected. But they ran that, and that's messed up, right? Because, let's face it, people are afraid of sexual things because they don't assume that their kids are going to see violence and then want to go out and do violence, except for all the people that are trying to prove that video games cause violence. Still, they don't. But they think that, there is a drive with people sexually. So instead of, getting some training wheels, establishing some boundaries, educating kids on that, you hide them away from that for as long as possible. So their first experience is going to be logically as bad and damaging and soul destroying as it possibly can be, because they don't know what they're getting into. I don't understand that, but that's because I'm not sex negative. I'm sex positive. And one person, staying on this, made a very interesting comment about why the sex negative types don't believe they're sex negative. Because, as they pointed out, I identified without realizing it that they allow in their own kinks, just not anybody else's. But that doesn't meet the definition of sex positivity. You can't call yourself sex positive accurately unless you're good with anything that is safe, sane, and consensual. Period. End of story. 2 consenting adults who are of sound mind, mostly. You know what I mean? You don't have to total clean bill of mental health, but you do have to be able to consent from a safe and sane way. That's the litmus test. It doesn't matter if anybody else is into it. I don't have to be into it to go, all right, is it consenting adults? Is everybody in a mind frame? Some people add sober to that. Safe, sane, sober, and consensual. But I still think sane. Because, you had one drink, all right, fine. You've had 8 drinks? No, that person can't consent. Right? And it comes right down to sex positivity is all about, it's empowering to say no because you're empowered to say yes. So somebody is going to, what are you, a prude? Because no, you're not. You're just not into that, right? Like, thank you, but no. And everybody respects that people aren't not everybody's into everything. And that doesn't make the thing bad. It just means that is not their preference, right? Again, different than sexual orientation, because someone being a particular orientation, they are attracted to people of your gender or my gender does not mean they're attracted to you, does not mean they're attracted to me, right? Makes sense? That's sex positivity. That seems so simple, but because sex positivity is the cool form, cool chick okay with sexism, remember? If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It's an in-joke. Kind of. But, it is harder to actually maintain that mindset than people think, because we all get stuff every so often where we hear about it. We're like, ew, and figuring out when you're going ew because you're just being a bit judgy, and when you're going ew because it's not safe or it's not sane or it's not consensual, that takes maturity. And that means I personally think people should walk before they run with this stuff. There's an emotional component that needs to be involved. Anyway, I appreciate how maturely everybody handled this discussion. I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And that brings me to the last, which was the first video for the week, the Hogwarts Legacy Troy Levitt thing. The most validating feedback I got from this is Troy himself praised it, which I was not expecting. I don't know why, because Troy's very cool. But he was very complimentary on it, and I really appreciated that, because I didn't even think. I think because in his shoes, if I were him, I wouldn't have watched it. Troy and I are different that way, because I'm like, people can say what they want. I don't need to hear it. Troy is like, people can say what they want. How curious. Just, different takes on it. Both are cool. I was also really glad that many people commented positively on how educational it was. That was not my intent, but awesome. And if education can be done that way so that people don't feel lectured, and I guess it's presenting the history to somebody and telling people what to think based on that history are not the same thing. So there's a big difference between this happened and this happened, so now you have to do stuff you may not be cool with. Very different. So I'm going to keep that in mind. That was very interesting that people liked the educational aspects. People liked the historical aspects. And this is sort of 2 weeks in a row where people have liked the history lessons. I will keep that in mind. That's cool. What that tells me going forward is my kind of mantra of give people the information, don't tell them what to do with it, is working. That's effective. It's more effective than like scolding, right? And I don't have much time, but the last thing I want to address is people brought up the whole dreaded Gamergate angle with what happened with Hogwarts Legacy. I want to let Gamergate go. Personally, to see my face, like, what is it? I'm like a Mike Myers character all of a sudden. I have let Gamergate go. I do not care, where people stood on that issue. I care how people behaved and continue to behave, right? Like, people didn't become completely different people because of that. They didn't stop being the same person when they walked away. Some people did get exposed to some stuff and they came out of it, but like, I judge people on their actions, not. And obviously there's some gray area, like some people's opinions are sort of like, no, don't be openly racist to somebody. Don't be racist at all, but like, everybody's got internalized that don't be a jerk. Don't be, openly bad to somebody. Like, that's more of an action than an opinion to me. But I want to get away from wrongthink. I do not care where someone was on that issue. I recognize that there are people in the press that keep trying to drop that in. And I do find that counterproductive. But having been in the rooms where it happened, Oh, I couldn't get through without singing. There we go. But no one else was in the room when it happened, I love that song. But having been in those discussions, there is still, like, you gotta find a way to tie it into something that people will search. Because people are not searching that term anymore like they once did. And I understand that it is almost like game journalist Tourette's. Apologize to anybody with actual Tourette syndrome. Hear me out. Like, they just have this compulsion to go, Gamergate. Like, some people just want to drop that in there. Either because they're still wounded by it, or they think there are various reasons. But that alone is not going to get clicks nowadays. J.K. Rowling's name will. Trust me, I'll search right now. I guarantee you there'll be a new J.K. Rowling story, okay? Let's see. J.K. Rowling. News. Here we go. Yep. 2 hours ago, Ralph Fiennes defends J.K. Rowling. It just is a story that will not die. And this is how media works. This is an element I hate about media. It always made me sick to my stomach that even back in the TV days, the way things worked, encouraging attacking people instead of attacking ideas, it always made me uncomfortable. It's something I struggle with this industry all the time. But it's the way news works, right? J.K. Rowling does something, Cardi B does something, excuse to talk about it, right? Excuse to talk about a particular issue. But you just can't drop an op-ed piece on an issue without an inciting incident, for lack of a better term, because that's just not the way the media works. If you want that, you got to go get documentary funding. And even then, some current hook, something tying into the zeitgeist is essential. And I think people are stuck on that because they're traumatized by it too. They're traumatized by the reason I think Gamergate was such a missed opportunity, and the reason I thought it was such a failure of leadership in the games industry, because everybody seems to feel like their side lost. And it's baffling to me. Like, it was just so poorly handled that everybody feels like they lost. Oh, they won, we lost. Trust me. I talked to people from all sides of that shitstorm, and everybody feels like they lost somehow. That's not an effectively managed challenge, right? Like, all you managers are out there going, yeah, it's pretty bad, right? Every single one of those shitstorms is a potential opportunity if it's handled properly. And that's why, even though I don't agree with Troy Levitt on the J.K. Rowling thing, I appreciate his optimism. I appreciate his impulse to use You know, the hypotheticals thing he put up about I would like to talk to J.K. Rowling and I would like to present her with some facts. That's one of the things I admire about him as a person as well as a professional, is that he's not so jaded and cynical that he has lost that urge to try and that optimism, right? And to me, that's the mark of a good person. Maybe that's my bias. It's also the mark of a very brave person. Which I think we underestimate a lot. I don't think we give that proper appreciation. So I am. And I'll leave that there. I'll end on a positive. But you guys have given me a lot to think about this week. Not like I don't spend a lot of time thinking. But I got a lot to chew on. It's making me think a lot of thoughts that I'll be discussing with the patrons about steps forward. So if you want to be in on that discussion, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Great week, guys. Thanks so much.